There's a child in Virginia that was born with two birthmarks, a small one on his chest and a larger irregular one on his back. Before he was 3 years old, he told his parents that he'd been shot, described the weapon, described the person who did it, described where he had lived, and what his name had been. When researchers tracked down the deceased individual and pulled the autopsy report, the entry and exit wounds from the gunshot matched that child's birthmarks exactly. That case is in a database at the University of Virginia School of Medicine along with 2,499 others alongside it. Why do those children remember their past lives and most of us don't? I came across this during the consciousness research that I was doing for this channel, and it all kind of makes sense once we connect all the details. Ian Stevenson chaired the psychiatry department at the University of Virginia in 1967. He stepped away from that to travel the world and investigate children who were spontaneously describing previous lives. 2- and 3-year-olds who started talking on their own about people that they never met, places that they'd never been to, and their deaths in specific detail. And Stevenson would get on a plane, go to where that child lived, and check every claim against the death certificates, birth records, and autopsy reports. And he was on that journey for 40 years. He went to India, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, Turkey, Alaska, Burma, Thailand. Wherever the cases were the strongest, that's where he went. By 1997, he had 210 cases where a child's birthmark or birth defect corresponded to a wound on a deceased individual. In 49 of those cases, he pulled the actual autopsy reports and the wound locations matched the child's marks precisely. A child is born into this world with birthmarks and memories that they shouldn't have, and when the previous person is identified, the autopsy shows the wound in the exact same location as the birthmarks. Around 70% of the cases involve violent or unnatural deaths. Children who describe drowning are terrified of water before they can explain why they're terrified of water. Children who describe being hurt by a weapon describe the specific type of weapon without being shown anything. The phobias, the emotional patterns, the physical marks. Science doesn't have an explanation for how any of that gets from one life to the next. And Stevenson was very clear about his conclusions. He never said any single case proved it beyond doubt, but after 40 years of this work, he said reincarnation was the best explanation that he could find for these strong cases. Jim Tucker runs that division now, and the database is over 2,500 cases, and more than 100 cases per year are flowing in. The University of Virginia School of Medicine has been running this quietly since 1967, and I don't hear it being talked about very much. The timing of when these memories appear and disappear tells us something important. Children begin describing a previous life around 2 or 3, and the memories are clearest between 2 and 5. Around 5 to 7, they fade. Details get less precise, the child stops bringing it up, and by middle childhood, the memories are gone. Sometimes what stays is like a residue, a fear with no origin, or a phobia, or something like that. That same window, ages 5 to 7, is when the brain is building out the architecture of normal adult consciousness. The part of the brain that handles autobiographical memory and the sense of being a continuous self across the time comes fully online right around the moment the previous life memories go quiet. But something else is happening in that same window that's very important in this context. Pineal gland calcification starts in childhood, the shift from theta brainwaves, where children spend most of their time naturally, into the beta dominance of normal adult waking consciousness. And that happens around the ages of 5 to 7. The Gateway research, the Monroe Institute work, everything the CIA classified around accessing consciousness, all of it was trying to get adults back into that state that children inhabit naturally. Theta is where entity contact happens and where the gateway work happened. Theta is where children between 2 and 5 are living when they describe their previous personality's family by name. Children in that window describe things that adults can't perceive. They carry detailed memories from lives that ended before this one began. Around 5 to 7, that filter comes on and most of that just shuts down. Stevenson's cases are instances where the filter left a gap. The wound location, the family name, the address, the cause of death. That all came through before the suppression was complete. Whether a child remembers a previous life comes down entirely to whether the filter caught everything before the memories surfaced. What's interesting is that every tradition that takes reincarnation seriously describes forgetting as something that's done to them rather than something that just happens. Plato describes souls drinking from the river Lethe before rebirth, the river of forgetfulness. Hinduism frames their entire spiritual path around escaping the cycle of rebirth. Buddhism calls the same cycle by a different name, but it leads to the same exact exit. The Gnostic traditions describe physical incarnation as a trap, consciousness caught in matter, cycling through lives, with the forgetting as the mechanism keeping it there. Monroe found the same thing from inside the consciousness states the CIA was classifying. Earth as a system of generating emotional energy, consciousness cycling through physical lives, the forgetting as a deliberate feature rather than a byproduct. If you think about what that forgetting part actually does, it seems pretty logical. Consciousness that remembers dying thousands of times wouldn't generate the same fear of death. Grief carries its specific weight because you don't remember having lost everything before and surviving anyway. Love feels the way it feels because you don't remember finding it and losing it across dozens of lifetimes. The forgetting keeps the emotional responses fresh every time. If the system runs on that energy, the forgetting is what keeps the system running. Once you see it that way, everything that reinforces the forgetting starts to make a lot more sense. The pineal gland calcification that restricts DMT access through the exact organ every ancient tradition identifies as the gateway to non-physical perception. And the Book of Enoch that was removed from Scripture was describing consciousness encounters between lives. The Gateway Program classified psychedelic research that was shut down while it consistently produced accounts of contact with the same realm Monroe was mapping. Near-death experiences, people who came back from clinical death describing consciousness operating outside of their own body, knowing things that happened in their rooms while they were flatlined, then getting diagnosed and medicated rather than studied. All of that is covering the same ground from different directions, what consciousness actually is and what happens to it between lives. The wound showing up on a child's body at birth, the 3-year-old naming a family in another country, the autopsy confirming those matches. But that's just what gets through when the filter doesn't catch everything. And there's a crazy idea that kind of crossed my mind when I was putting all this together. If reality is a simulation, and the holographic principle that we talked about in a previous video is saying that there may be something real there, then past life experiences are residual data from a previous run that didn't get fully wiped before the new instance launched. Think about getting a used hard drive. The previous owner deleted everything, right? The operating system shows empty, but the data's still in the sectors, fragmented, partially overwritten, but not fully erased. Under the right conditions, those old files can surface, but they weren't supposed to carry over. The system was supposed to start clean. The children in Stevenson's database are running a new instance with old data bleeding through it. The previous personality's wound location, name, family, cause of death. Fragmented data from the last run sitting in sectors that weren't fully wiped. The filter that comes online between the ages of 5 and 7 is a system running the cleanup process that should have ran at the start of the new instance but ran late. The fact that it runs late in some cases and that data bleeds through long enough for a 3-year-old to name a family in another country and point to a wound on their own body means the erasure is a deliberate step in the process. Something writes it, something executes it, and sometimes it gets executed late. If that is the case, then someone wrote that cleanup routine. Someone decided that a new instance shouldn't carry forward data from a previous run. Someone decided that our emotional responses needed to be fresh every time. The big question is, if you knew you were going to live again and had unlimited chances at life, even if you didn't remember the previous one, just the fact that knowing you'll come back as someone else, would that change the way you live your current life? I guess for me, even if I knew I wasn't going to be remembering anything from this current life, I would still try to make the most of it and retain those memories for as long as I can. What are your thoughts? And more importantly, what do you think the implications on humanity would be if this actually turned out to be true? That we can recycle our lives and we just keep coming back over and over and over again without any memory of the past one. Do you think that people would be more reckless in their current lives? Personally, I wouldn't mind coming back over and over and over again, but I don't want to know about it. I want to live this current life in the moment and make the best I can of it without having to worry about what's going to happen in the next one. And also, if we do come back over and over and over again, do we always get the same version of reality? Or do we get different versions of reality and different instances along the timeline every time we return? I would love to know what you guys and gals think about this one. As always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, like, and leave that comment. I do read as many of those as I can, and I go through them and try to respond to as many as I can. And thankfully, they're getting longer and longer, and I'm getting more and more comments, which is amazing. So I'm trying to keep up on all of them, and I'm doing my best. Thanks again, and until next time, I'll talk to you later.